After the empty tomb, if we look at the material, Matthew and Luke share nothing. In the rest of the narrative, where they do not follow Mark, they do not agree with each other either. So, how do we account for this? The circumstances of the Gospel's composition, the author, the audience, the date, and the location are wholly a matter of scholarly speculation. They are not certain. It's natural to ask who these authors were. There are two approaches to this question, the ancient and then the modern. We'll look at both of them. The ancient first. The ancient approach was taken through the names of the authors themselves, relying upon traditions found in early Christian writings, trying to identify who Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John were. The problem with this approach is that identifications are based solely on guesswork. For example, Papias, a 2nd century figure, averred that Matthew first wrote in the Hebrew dialect. We are not sure what that meant. The Hebrew dialect could mean classical Hebrew or Aramaic, and it was later translated into Greek by others. We only have fragments of Papias' writings found in Eusebius' church history. Papias went on to state that Mark was a translation of Peter's preaching in Rome. The reason why this connection is made, that is, Mark getting connected with Peter, is because of the first letter of Peter, in which he speaks of a Mark being alongside Peter, writing presumably from Rome. However, in the New Testament, Mark appears more often as a companion of Paul than of Peter. Moreover, Mark is one of the most common names in the Roman Empire. It's very unlikely that only one Christian is going to have the name Mark. Luke is identified as a physician and a companion of Paul based on Paul's letter to the Colossians, where he refers to Luke, the beloved physician, who is with him. John is identified as the beloved disciple in the 4th Gospel because the Gospel of John, otherwise anonymous, refers to one of the disciples as the disciple whom Yeshua or Jesus loved. This tradition identifies John the Seer, named in the book of Revelation, as the beloved disciple. We see these traditions in the Meritorium Canon, a copy perhaps of the oldest known list of books of the New Testament. With this ancient approach, where identifications are based totally upon guesswork, they have a strong apologetic interest, wanting to get these Gospels under apostolic authority, even though obviously they weren't all written by apostles. These apologists are trying to connect these stories to the big guys. They know of a Mark connected with Peter. They know of a Luke connected with Paul. Matthew is regarded as Matthew the Apostle, the follower of Jesus. John is regarded as John the beloved disciple. The Apostle Mark is connected to Peter, the chief apostle. What could be better? Luke is connected with Paul. In Henry Cudbury's article titled Luke and the Horse Doctors, he showed beautifully, I think, how Luke's actual vocabulary with regard to sickness is not that of the trained medical technician, but the language of any well-educated person in antiquity. This is important because there was, and I believe there still is, a tradition that Luke was a physician. So people try to interpret Luke's gospel as though only a physician could have written it. People will therefore look at the way in which Luke speaks about sicknesses and fevers and say, see, we recognize Luke, the physician, there. When we come to the modern approach, it is done through the literary and historical analysis of the compositions themselves. This approach is what is followed by contemporary scholars. How is this approach different from the ancient one? That is, how is the modern approach different from the ancient approach? No presupposition is made that Luke is a specific figure or that John is a specific figure. Rather, we try to build up the circumstances of writing in terms of social setting and themes, etc., with very little attention to the identity of the actual authors. The reconstruction of the circumstances then becomes the framework for the interpretation of the Gospels. Well, this is 50-50. Sometimes it is successful and sometimes it is not successful. It works brilliantly, though, for the Gospel of Matthew, not so for the Gospel of Luke.